Welcome to the GodXP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. I'm Anthony Polanco. Our guest today is Corey Wilks. He's a licensed clinical psychologist. He's a certified professional coach, and he's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. Corey and I met a month ago in Rite of Passage, which is a cohort-based course for online writing. I've found Corey to be inspirational, insightful in his writing, and just an all-around really interesting person. He helps founders, entrepreneurs, creatives to achieve their full potential, to shape their lives and businesses for success. By all means, follow Corey online on Twitter at Corey Wilks PsyD. Subscribe to his newsletter at corey.wilkspsyd.com. Enjoy our conversation about self-actualization, psychology, death, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. All right, welcome to the GodXP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. Today we've got Mr. Corey Wilks, the Indomitable. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, certified professional health coach, among many other things. He's also an online writer at corey.wilkspsyd.com. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt and a fellow Rite of Passage alumni. Corey, how you doing?
Pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Doing great, dude. Doing great. I'm really glad that we got to do this, dude. I just for full discretion, I just met Corey about a month or so ago. We both took Rite of Passage, which is a cohort-based course for online writers, and just finished. How do you feel?
Good, man. I was able to crank out some really good articles, I think.
Yeah, I was reading them. I thought it was really interesting. And some of the things I wanted to talk about today was how you write a lot about like death and and facing death in your life, and how that's a transformative thing for people. And that's something that has guided my life. Like, I've been in a few car accidents. I've had some psychedelic experiences involving death, and a lot of my writing has to do with death as well, just because of how much it's changed my paradigm in life and has been the vehicle for my change. So I thought that was really interesting. Like, I noticed that there's something that links people who, I wrote about this, like everyone who is comfortable talking about death has seen it in one way or another, and it's noticeable in their life. Some people don't like talking about it, and you can tell the people who are really comfortable with it, that it's really changed them.
Yeah, I think one of the things for people who haven't read my writing, I don't talk about death from the perspective of like grief and bereavement. I talk about it from Memento Mori, right? So I think the reason people like you and me and a lot of, entrepreneurs gravitate toward things like that is a lot of us gravitate towards stoicism, right? Because it's just a very practical, philosophical approach, right? I came across Memento Mori, which just means remember death or remember you will die. I came across it through Ryan Holiday's books, right? So I really like the idea of using mortality as a motivator to live fully, right? Because most people either take their time for granted or they pursue just the wrong shit. I hope I can cuss on here.
Yeah.
And they chase the wrong things. And then they end up, being 60, 70, 80, and they look back on their life full of regrets. Right. So when I first came across this concept, I was like, shit, man, like I am totally taking so much of my life for granted, right? Like I'm not spending time with the people I love. I'm not being present when I'm with them, but also I'm procrastinating because I'm acting like I'm going to live forever. Or like, oh, I'll do that later. I'll start my website next year. I'll do this, later. Well, eventually later is no longer an option, right? So I thought I had a pretty good handle over Memento Mori, but it was very theoretical still. And then this last year, I actually almost died. So then it became way more than theoretical, right? So long story short, and I've written about this too, but through jujitsu, I got a really bad bruise, right? So I do a lot of butterfly guard. And at the time I was doing a lot of shin on shin stuff. And when you do that, shin bruises are super common. I had one that I thought was like a hairline fracture. It hurt so bad. It was in a spot that I had gotten bruises tons of other times, so I didn't think anything about it. So, jujitsu guy, I'm like, fuck it. If it's still bad in a week, maybe then I'll go to the doctor.
Right.
I'll try to walk it off. And it got way worse. And my skin, legs started turning purple and red and just weird colors. Yeah. So I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, you have a hematoma and it may have become infected and become an abscess. Take these meds. If it gets worse, come back. It got way worse. So by the time I got back to the hospital, they immediately prepped me for surgery because they're like, look, we're waiting on test results, but we don't know if the infection has gotten into your bloodstream or your bones. Whoa. If it has, you can die or at the very least lose a limb. I was like, fuck. And, this is during COVID shit too, right? So I was in the ER waiting for a hospital bed for like 12 or 18 hours. Like it was insane because all the beds were full. So they finally, get me in and, I have to have surgery and things to remove all of the infected tissue and things. And thankfully, I was good. I just have like gnarly scar now. But when I was in the hospital the night before surgery, it was just me, right? Because again, COVID, visitation restrictions, like you can't have anybody in the room with you, which is super fucked up. So I'm just sitting there alone in this hospital bed with just like the beeping of the machine and like the occasional nurse coming in to draw blood to keep me company. So I remember laying in bed, not knowing if I was going to die or not. And I thought to myself, what if this was the last week alive for me? Right. And you hear about these thought exercises like, oh, if you only had a week to live or a month to live, like, what would you do? That's bullshit. Because if you have time to plan it out, you can go out with a bang, you can party, you can skydive, do all this other shit. That isn't a helpful thought experiment. For me, it was like, am I satisfied with how I've already lived? So if I can't do anything more, let me look back. Am I satisfied with how I spent my time? And thankfully that week I spent time writing online, coaching people, spending time with my loved ones, doing jujitsu. I was satisfied with what could have been my last week alive. So ever since then, I'm like, look, any week could be my last. So I don't fuck with shit that isn't fulfilling. I have turned down, therapy jobs for close to $100,000 because I'm like, look, I no longer want to do that. I don't want to work 40, 50 hours doing, dealing with bureaucracy and red tape and insurance bullshit. I want to coach. I want to write. I want to teach. If it isn't those things, that doesn't give me freedom and that isn't truly and deeply fulfilling for me, I just don't fuck with it anymore.
Yeah. That's one of the craziest jujitsu injury stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, dude, like for real, they're like, I don't fuck with shit on shit anymore. Like, I know it affects my game, but I'm like, look, man, like I can't.
I understand that, dude. I can't imagine, but I know that's a familiar bruise, that shin bruise.
Yeah.
That's a brutal feeling, man. So that's amazing. That's amazing. So there's a lot to unpack there because most people, this is what I try to get across in my writing all the time. It's like, how do you give people that urgency? You can't really think yourself into it. You could try. It's fun. It's kind of fun to be like, okay, if someone walked in and put a gun to your head right now, and said, what did you, it's like the Fight Club. Like, what did you wish you would have done? That's kind of a fun thought experiment. But like, until you actually are facing death, and you have to have that feeling of like, holy shit, like the door is right there and I'm getting pushed towards the door and I don't want to go through it. That sense of existential urgency is what people, I think, what ties people who have had these life-changing experiences together. Mm-hmm. What do you think, like, is the most effective method that you've found for helping people have this like realization in their life or have this mortal confrontation willingly?
So some of the people I work with have already had their own experiences, or they're at least familiar with, Memento Mori and things. So that's usually helpful. Others, they haven't, but they have felt that pull of like, I know I could do more with my life. Some of the people I've worked with have chased money to the exclusion of meaning, right? So like money isn't bad. There's nothing wrong with money. But when you pursue money that is unfulfilling and makes you miserable, that becomes an issue, right? So a lot of the people that end up, either hiring me for coaching or, we talk or whatever, it's usually around like, hey man, I'm trying to figure out what is worth my time to do. Like, what do I dedicate my life to at this point? So either they're trying to break it out of the 9 to 5 and trying to build, a business that is purpose driven for them, or they've already built other businesses that didn't align with the person they wanted to be. So now they're like, look, I don't have clarity on what the fuck I'm even aiming at. I need help developing that clarity. So that's usually what I do. Occasionally I'll get somebody who hasn't come across Memento Mori, then like I explain it in different terms. One of the other stories that I share, and is part of the reason why I got into writing and coaching and things, is again, back to Memento Mori. I had a couple friends. So one of them, he was an attorney for years. He did the traditional job route, but he was really passionate about writing. He really wanted to be an author. So over the last couple of years, he had quit practicing law and started writing a book. He sunk all his life savings into it, and he and his partner were super excited for this book. And then one day he went to the doctor and he got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Right. So, as a writer, that's terrifying, right? Like to die with a half completed manuscript. And then shortly, like around that same time, I had another friend, same deal. He went the traditional route, was, did some other, jobs and shit he didn't really care about. Finally went back to get a creative writing degree, also to write a book, a memoir, something like that. Halfway through the program, fucking died, right? Like freak accident type health issue. And then around the same time, I had a third friend. She retired early to enjoy her health because she didn't, she liked her job, but it didn't really fulfill her. So she's like, I'm going to retire so I can enjoy my health while I still have it. Within the year, she was diagnosed with like metastatic breast cancer, and it's like untreatable. So really all they can do is like palliative care. And I got so pissed off because that's 3 friends back to back to back who pushed off pursuing a fulfilling life because they were afraid, right? Afraid of failure, afraid of ridicule, afraid of uncertainty, all this other shit. So that was what really pushed me over the edge to put myself out there, to write online and to share my experience and expertise in psychology to try to help as many people as I can, because I just too many people die regretting not having done more with their lives. There's even like a fucking Cornell study that said like 76% of people die with the same regret, and it was essentially that they didn't live up to like their ideal self, or basically they lived in mediocrity, and then on their deathbed they're like, fuck, I really wish I would have taken more chances. Right. So like, that's where I come in, is like, I'm trying to help you avoid that on down the line by now, regardless of how old you are, identifying what the fuck makes you tick on a fundamental level and how can you build your life around that so that you can, reach your potential, pursue self-actualization, whatever the fuck you want to call it, just get more out of life than what most people are willing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's amazing. So like, where did this, like, I know that you lost your homies, and the fact that, man, that's such an existential shock. And the same thing, the same reason I write, I saw myself die and was like, holy fuck, I didn't write my book. Like, all the things I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years are like my bucket list after the fact. Like, I feel like this is my second life already. And if I know that any day I could go. So I'm like, if I just put something on the page and get it out, if I die tomorrow, this is, so that's a good enough reason. But like, at what point did you start having compassion enough for the world that you were like, my meaning is to help the world rather than like just to self-serve? Because was that something that you had since you were a kid, or was it these experiences halfway through that really changed that for you?
So a couple things. So I grew up poor as fuck in like rural Appalachia. Right. So like, yeah, like, I have the doctorate now and like also the shit, but like I grew up on like food stamps and like welfare and shit. Okay. So I was surrounded by people who didn't even, consider like entrepreneurship as an option. Right. Like I remember, you know, like my dad, he got hurt doing like manual labor shit. And he was like, look, son, whatever you do, use your brain, not your body. Right. So like, even though my parents, didn't have fancy jobs or fancy education shit, they're like, look, you are going to invest in your mind and leverage your intelligence and your ability to learn to do something, right? They didn't know what it was going to be, but like they had like, so most of the people where I'm from, their parents didn't, empower them in that direction. Right. Like, and you hear horror stories about people where like they want to do more, but their families stop them, say, no, people from, out here, we don't go that way. Like we go over here, we work in this specific industry, we work in the mines, or we do this, we do that, whatever. My family was the opposite. They're like, look, we don't know how to help you, but we know that we're going to support you in a way that we can. So from an early age, I knew that was how I was going to make a living somehow. Super vague though. And then I remember when I went to college, I started off as like business management major or some shit. Hated it because I was like, I want to help people. And it was all about like numbers and, bullshit that I was like, I'm not a math guy. I don't want to fuck with all the numbers. So then I was like, oh, well, I like nutrition. So I tried out dietetics. Then I realized I don't give a fuck how much zinc is in asparagus. Like I just don't. So, I bounced around to a couple different, majors for the first couple of years. And then finally, and like I had been in therapy as a kid because like I went through like some rough shit, like domestic violence and all sorts of shit. So like I'd been in therapy as a kid, fucking hated it. And had taken psychology classes in high school and college, fucking hated it. I was like, this is some shrink bullshit. Like, no, I don't fuck with this. And then I had it was a required like adult or child development course. And so it was a psychology class. And I remember his name's Dr. Keelan Hinton. I always shout him out anytime I can. I was expecting some like old ass white dude that like when he moves, fucking chalk dust just poofs out from his armpits or something. And in walks this young black dude from Memphis, right? Dressed real casual. And this motherfucker talked like he was from Memphis. He wasn't professorial, right? He came in with like, fucking tattoo sleeves and like all this shit. Like, and he was super real. And I was like, I'm gonna like this class. Like already, like I'm sold. And the passion he had for psychology and the way that he explained it helped me understand the power psychology has to unlock people's potential. Right. So I had his class, and like that day I was like, I'm changing my major to psychology. And now I'm a psychologist, right? Like I tell him all the time, I was like, dude, you are the reason I'm a psychologist. Like all this shit that I've built started with you. So I saw people as puzzles, and psychology helped empower you to solve that puzzle. So then over the course of, undergrad and grad school and shit, I went into clinical psychology. So doing therapy and things. And it's been sort of a slow evolution. So I mostly worked in integrated primary care, which just means I worked at like a medical clinic. So if you went in and asked your physician, hey doc, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm addicted to heroin, I'm really struggling with obesity, whatever, they would refer you to me. And I really like doing therapy. but there were a couple issues with it. So, I have all this training to like help people overcome obstacles and get the most out of life. But with therapy is inherently a pathology model, meaning we don't define wellness. Like we don't tell you what wellness looks like. We define wellness as the absence of illness, which is super fucked up, right? Like we don't say, like you're happy. We say you no longer meet diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder, single episode mild, right? Like it's super fucked up. So we never studied what thriving looks like. We never studied, what the discipline of positive psychology. We never looked at that. We only ever studied sick people, which I get it. That's what clinical psychology is about. But it's like you're trying to help people be better, but you never define what better is, right? Like you're leading people to a land you've never seen, right?
Yeah.
Like that's therapy in a nutshell for a lot of people. So I enjoyed helping people overcome, panic attacks and deal with depression and get into recovery, sobriety from addiction. Like that was super fulfilling for me. The issue was, at least in America, the way insurance companies work. Because again, I worked in rural Appalachia. So the majority of people I saw were on Medicaid. They couldn't afford shit out of pocket. Okay. Literally, we had people who like, if they had a $5 copay, they couldn't afford it. Okay. Like that is how poor and underserved some of the people I worked with were. And the way insurance works is they pay for certain diagnoses for a certain period of time. So if you don't have the right diagnosis, right? So there are some diagnoses that are pretty much just like a vague category of like, depression, not otherwise specified or unspecified, and, adjustment disorder, like random shit that is just super vague. Sometimes they don't like those, or they only pay for them for a certain amount of time. So let's say you come to me for depression. Okay. Once we get you decently well off, you're still kind of struggling, but overall you can function. Insurance will say, oh, you no longer meet diagnostic criteria for this disorder based on DSM-5 criteria. Thus, you are subclinical and no longer need therapy. So we're not going to pay for it anymore. So all I was allowed to do was help people survive, to just barely get their head above water. I could never help them, do more with their life, or, to flourish, to thrive, whatever you want to, call it. I literally wasn't allowed to do it, because that would mean that they would have to pay for it out of pocket. And the population I worked with at the time couldn't. Mm-hmm. So, and I've written about, my transition from therapy to coaching before, but long story short, I moved to a new state and I was doing remote therapy. And the place I was working for, after a couple months, decided they didn't want to support remote positions anymore, which made no fucking sense. But the way therapy licensure for psychology works in America is I can be anywhere in the world and do a remote session with you. But you, as my patient, have to physically be in the state I'm licensed in during the time of the appointment. Wow. You don't have to live in that state. You have to have your 2 fucking feet on that piece of dirt during that 30 to 45 minute session. Okay. So I was licensed in West Virginia, but living in Kentucky. When I lost my job, I couldn't find another remote position out of West Virginia. I wasn't willing to move back. And in order to get licensed in Kentucky would have been 4 months or longer, just because of how fucked up the licensure process is. Okay. So I was like, fuck, what do I do with my life? Right. Like I got all this training, all this fucking student debt and all this other shit. And throughout school, we talked mad shit about life coaches. Okay. Because to be a life coach, there's no qualification, right? Like the coaching field as a whole isn't regulated. That's just the reality. And we're like, oh, we're psychologists. We're too good for that. So I had a lot of internalized stigma about calling myself a coach or going into coaching. That was just the reality of it. So I had removed that as an option for my life, even though I was inexorably like drawn toward that, right? Because
Mhm.
coaching is about having people flourish and like do more with themselves. But I was like, nah, coaching's bullshit. And then during like this, because when they gave me my notice, I had 30 days and 3 paychecks worth of runway to figure out the rest of my fucking life. Right. So I looked online and I found this article by the American Psychological Association. And it was talking about life coaches and just coaching in general. They're like, look, it is an unregulated field. However, people with mental health training can join this new discipline and improve the overall quality of it. And I was like, fuck, that makes so much sense. Like, why has nobody ever said that before? And this article was like 10 years old or 13 years old. And one of the guys who was quoted in it, it said that he runs like a training, like certification program for coaches. It's called the College of Executive Coaching. His name's Dr. Jeffrey Auerbach. And so I looked at it, and it is an organization that is run primarily by psychologists for people with graduate degrees in mental health training. I was like, this is fucking perfect. So I went through that training to help me make the mental shift from a pathology model to a model of you're helping relatively, air quotes, normal people flourish. So it is a very strengths-based approach. Took it and then, opened up, my own coaching business and, writing online, also the shit. So like that is a very long answer to a short question of how I came to this. Like it was a very slow evolution from one thing to the next until where I'm at now. But it was never just like a light bulb, like, oh, I'm just going to fucking help people, self-actualize.
Yeah.
It didn't happen that way.
That's amazing, dude. It's amazing. It's funny how you thought that like your initial impression of psychology was like, oh, that's bullshit, and then you fell in love with it. And then the same thing with coaching, you were like, that's bullshit. And then you fell in love with it, and it became you, that's amazing when you really think about it. And it's funny how when you look back on your life, like I could do the same thing, I could look back on everything that I am now. When I was a kid, I would have been like, what the hell, how the hell did you end up like that?
Well, and part of it is, like I hated psychology because of the psychologists I came across, right? Like, I remember, being in therapy as a kid, and this one, she was a psychiatrist, but I remember she would cuss in session, and like I was a kid, and I was like, hey, is it cool if I cuss? And she was like, no. I was like, well, fuck this shit. Like, bitch, you're cussing in front of me and I can't fucking cuss. Like, how the fuck are you trying to build trust and shit with me and like build rapport? Like, fuck all this. Like, yeah. And I mean, you think about it, right? When you think of a psychologist, what is like the stereotype, right? Like this old motherfucker with this fucking blazer with like elbow patches and, sitting on a couch with a clipboard talking to you about your relationship with your mother and shit. And I was like, that's bullshit. Right. And for a couple of the jobs I had, I did have to dress up, which is another issue. Like I'm like allergic to khakis and polos. Like I fucking hate them. It is what it is. But eventually, once I, had doctor in front of my name, I could kind of dress how I wanted. So like I would come to session, with my tattoos, like very visible. I talked like this, right? Like, cause I was like, look, I have to be able to be me. I have to be able to be authentic in order to be effective. So when I was going through, and I would look at psychologists like, y'all don't look like me. Y'all don't talk like me. Like, I don't want to be like you. Right. And every psychologist is like, oh, how does it make you feel? Like, dude, I remember I was working with this teenager one day because I mostly worked with like angry teenagers and people, struggling with addiction and things. And so, people who had an issue with authority like me. So this one kid, he came in, he's like, I don't want to, he had like punched a hole in the wall and also shit at school. I was like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I was like, good, because I don't give a fuck about your feelings. He was like, what? I was like, I don't give a fuck how you feel. What are you going to do with your anger the next time it hits you? Like the next time you get pissed off, what is your specific fucking plan to control your shit and move on? He was like, dude, nobody's ever asked me that before. He's like, that's awesome. Like, I hate thinking about my emotions. Like, that's fine. I'm not going to try to force you to do it. Like you got to take a different approach. Right. So when I found that I was allowed to put my own spin on things, the world opened up.
Was that something that you were like that you were afraid you'd have to contend with, obviously, like going into this profession, like when you were training for it?
Yeah. So I thankfully had a mentor or supervisor early on. And because I told her, I can't do this or I can't do that until I get my degree. And she was like, it's not about credentials, it's about attitude. And she was full of it. Like she was full of attitude. Like when she walked in the room, everybody fucking knew it. But she was right. Like she paved a very good career path for herself based solely on her authenticity and audacity to embrace it. So I had her in my ear of like, no, just fucking be you. Like, fuck them. Fuck them if they don't like it. Be you. What the fuck are they going to say? And I ran into a couple other supervisors who were like, no, like polos and khakis all day. This is how you do it. Very regimented. And then I looked at both of them. I was like, who's happier? Right.
Yeah.
Who has a better life? Like, yeah, like obviously, like also like who makes more money, but who is legitimately happier? And the person who was happier was the person who embraced their authenticity and let people talk shit about them because of it. Because she's like, fuck them. I'm over here making fucking bank, traveling all over the world. They can sit there in their fucking 40-hour work week bullshit and khakis and a polo. I don't give a fuck about them. I'm in Belize this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took a lot from her approach.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's also interesting how like the figures in your life that got you where you are, it's like really, we don't really always reflect on the role models that inspire us to be who we are, but like even just having one person who embodies like a certain trait or many traits that you like aspire to, that's all you need is just to see one person do it. Like one person do it right. Like when I was a kid, it would be like, like a rapper or a singer or a ball player. Then as I became older, it might be a writer or an entrepreneur. But just seeing one person do it, like for example, Elon Musk, just knowing that someone can do all that stuff. It's just, now I know I can do anything. Mm-hmm. And it's just having one person show the way. It's like, okay, that's how I want to be. And now I can just go do it and laser beam straight to it.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that I've really come into over the last year is, I know a lot of psychologists, but I don't know a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Because I remember like when I was in grad school, because, some people become psychologists to open up a private practice and do therapy. We got zero business training. Like I remember in grad school, I was like, hey, can we like partner with the College of Business to like teach us just basic business shit? And they just fucking didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I started, coaching or started just considering opening up my own thing and, writing online and shit, like I didn't personally know anybody who wrote online or who had their own business. So thankfully, through things like Twitter and some of the other like, online courses I've become like Rite of Passage, like that I've become a part of since over the last year, it's been incredibly empowering, right? Because, I was talking to my girlfriend about this earlier. Anytime I start to question myself or my ability to execute on this plan, this business I'm trying to build, anytime I start to question myself, I can just hit up somebody, be like, hey man, let's talk about this thing, or like, hey, what are you doing right now? Like, what projects are you working on? So either I could just get a pep talk, or I could just be like, look, I know this motherfucker and they are proving this shit is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, that whole thing of like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with or whatever the fuck it goes. It's that kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like I surround myself, obviously, before I surround myself, like, with books, and podcasts and shit, but that's a really good surrogate until you can actually talk to a real human being and work through shit.
Yeah. That's huge in the beginning. That was huge for me. I mean, podcasts, motivational shit on YouTube, like when you haven't heard anything, when you haven't learned anything about business or marketing or psychology, just like all the pop stuff is so good, and you could, that really got me going for the first few years, not having business friends, not having marketing friends. And even now, I felt like before taking online courses, I felt like it was adding one person, one new friend, 2 new friends every year. now I'm surrounded by people,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the powers of being a citizen of the internet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um it's funny, I actually did some consulting for therapists, therapy practices for a while. I was like trying to focus in on that market because I noticed that there was this gap between like what people are doing with online business and what therapists were doing. Like most practices are not doing like any telehealth, or like not modernizing around telehealth, which would be like, it's just a glaringly obvious thing. It's like brick and mortar businesses not having an e-commerce store. It's like so obvious in a lot of cases, and people are just not doing it. And I know it's like it's a what I found was it's a problem with the entire industry, and that's why people aren't trying to innovate around it.
Yeah. So a couple things with that. One, it depends on who you're working with, right? So if they're a private practice and they're like a cash only clinic, right? Telehealth isn't an issue because they can charge whatever they want for a session. If they're doing it, if they're accepting insurance, because basically the way insurance works, I mean, there's a bunch of fucked up shit with it, but like
Yeah.
insurance, one can just write you an IOU and say, hey, we owe you a bunch of money. We'll pay you when we pay you. You can fuck off. But it's also, if I charge $200 for an hour long session and I say, but I will accept insurance, insurance says, hey, we'll offer you 85. And that's it. Like, even though your rate is 200, we will offer you 85. You can take it or you cannot accept insurance.
Yeah.
And then and that's for in-person. With telehealth, and it may have changed over the last year because I don't do therapy anymore. But before telehealth, you would make like half as much or a fraction purely because it was telehealth, because insurance is just like, nah, we don't want to pay as much for that. So that is a deciding factor for a lot of businesses with therapy, is like, we want to offer it because it's way more convenient for our patients. They can just, roll out of bed and just turn on their fucking phone. But if the practitioner isn't making enough money to cover costs, they can't offer it.
Yeah.
Right. So like you said, like the system is super fucked up, but that's one of the reasons. But I mean, you're right. Like with marketing, I remember I worked at this private practice for a little bit. And because again, we get no training in, copywriting, SEO, marketing, all this shit. And my boss bought ad space. Specifically though, so if you go to like a grocery store and like the carts or the buggies, whatever you call them, there is this panel on the back of the cart. So like if I'm walking towards you with my cart, you are looking at me and you see like all the groceries, and you see that little place where like a child can sit. Mm-hmm. On that back plate, there's this little piece of ad space.
Yeah.
That literally no one could fucking read at the distance that they would be. Like, I would have to be right up in your face in your buggy to read this fucking, ad space. Impossible. She bought that. She spent thousands of dollars on this one little fucking square. I'm like, girl, you could have done that. Would have been better spent with like fucking Facebook ads or some shit. Like, what the fuck?
It's almost like
trained.
It's like a show, like a funny show.
Yeah, but it was real, and thousands of dollars. It's like, girl, like, you can't, like, what the fuck? I was like, I'm not a marketer, but fuck, I know this is a waste of money.
Could have seen that. Yeah, anyone could have seen that. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, man. I had a frustrating time trying to convince therapists and psychologists with their own practice that they could be doing more. Like, they just had no scope of like, dude, I've sold like stuff from China on websites, and like I've sold, my own marketing service, like with a one-click option, and I just thought, like, you guys have this amazing skill. This whole market is like packed with people who have this amazing gift, and they just have no motivation or realization that they could be like getting people to click a button and pay them money and be in a call with them all day long.
It's the paradigm, right? We call them schemas, but there's just, this paradigm of this is the way it is, right? So, one of my last jobs, I was salaried. Okay. So if I saw 2 people a day or 20 people a day, I got paid pretty much the same. There was like a very, very minimal bonus that wasn't worth the amount of people you had to see to get. But basically speaking, I got paid the same, no matter how many people I saw, no matter how good I was at my job, how long it took me to do my fucking notes, nothing. That breeds a toxic level of complacency.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, I remember like there was one time, and we would do like monthly staff meetings, so like with just a psychologist. There was one time for 3 months in a row, we spent, and we would have like 3 hours once a month. We spent 3 meetings, 3 months worth, 9 hours talking about the exact same shit because there was no consequence to figure it out or not figure it out. But we knew we had to fill up those 3 hours because if we didn't, we wouldn't get 3 hours next month. And dude, like, I'm just like itching out of my skin with it because I'm like, I can't fucking be here. Like we need to be more efficient. Well, why, Corey? There's no purpose in being more efficient.
Yeah, that's it.
And I'm like, look, man, by the time my patient walks out the door, my notes are fucking done. But then some people are like, oh no, I'm working on notes all evening and all this because they're just fucking around at work all day.
Yeah. The incentivization is not in the right place.
No. And the other thing, man, is, psychologists inherently come from academia, right? Academia is incredibly predatory. Not all, I'll make that caveat, but a fucking lot. And what I mean by that is you can spend years on this research project, and then sometimes you have to pay to submit it to a journal, to a book, whatever. And then they profit off of it and you don't get paid a goddamn thing. Like, dang, the most you're going to get is a free book, one free book, right?
That's insane.
So psychologists are conditioned to not think about monetizing their knowledge, right? And that's the thing is, I'm working on my own course right now. That's part of why I joined Rite of Passage, was to become a better storyteller and a better writer, so that the content I create in these, modules is actually engaging, right? It isn't just like a dry lecture. Because I taught college, in grad school, like I taught like 15 or 16 psychology classes, but it's just lecture, right? But that's the thing, man, is that's the environment you're coming from. You are not trained to have an entrepreneurial mindset to take the, like Jack Butcher talks about, build once, sell twice. You're not trained to think in those terms. You're trained to clock in, clock out. If you do research, you do research just for the sake of doing it, and expect no compensation beyond maybe if you present at a conference, they'll fly you out. Mm-hmm. That's it for most people.
Yeah. 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 I found that was a really difficult hurdle to get over. And like, just from a marketing perspective, I've gone into lots of different industries, and not every industry is like driven by sales and making, the incentivization for like immediate sales. But it's really hard to get over those hurdles. Some people, some sectors, they're just, if their bread isn't affected by how much or how little they sell, then it just doesn't click for them that they could be doing more. And even from a philanthropic perspective, or just like you have value to give, wouldn't you want to give more value to more people more often? And I think some people just get tricked out of that one way or another.
It's also, even thinking about it in terms of like a value ladder, right? So, I'm working to build mine, but right now, like my written content is free, right? Like I try, and I write on, mindset, habits, mental wellness, shit like that. So trying to, to make psychology accessible to more people, and to teach them things that they probably won't find elsewhere on the internet. So that is free. Like I don't want that to be a barrier. Right. And I'm working, like I said, on this course and some other things for like a medium price point. But like, one-on-one coaching, like that is a premium price tag, because I only work with, a handful of people at a time. And that is my time. My time doesn't scale. Right. But I know that isn't a viable option for a lot of people. So I try really hard to focus on offering lower priced high quality content for that same reason, because it isn't a mutually exclusive thing. It isn't either free shit or super expensive shit. Like there's plenty of wiggle room in the middle. But like you said, like a lot of people don't think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, man, you're right. It has a lot to do with schema, but I think like even myself, I've fallen into a lot of pitfalls of along the way of just like trying to monetize too early and like not giving a lot of free value up front, and wanting to withhold because, well, when I was young, I was broke, when I first got started in business, I had no money. I needed to make bread to eat. And so I tried to monetize really early and wasn't giving any value up front. And, that's and it's the same thing with having clients in a private practice. Like if you don't advertise, if you don't put out any free content, not even a blog, you're only going to get one new client a month or two new clients tops a month. And that's just from referrals. But if you're constantly writing online, giving value, then you're helping so many people. And the top level, your top level services will get purchased more frequently because you just have a funnel, a humongous funnel with tons of people, 1,000 people, 2,000 reading your essays or whatever every month, whereas if you don't have a single essay, your impressions are 0 or 10 people a month if you have a sign outside, whatever. So just offering that free value is so important. I'm realizing that now. It's like, and it's the amount of time that it takes for you to be successful in any type of business is like it's determined by how much you give, how much impressions you're actually getting on your value. And that can't be beaten any other way.
I remember, because like I love reading books about the craft of writing. Like I nerd out over it. And I hated English class, which is telling about the education system, but I digress. There's this one book I read called Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit by Stephen Pressfield. And the whole concept is like, look, nobody is waiting with bated breath for you to hit publish. Nobody gives a single fuck about you or what you have to say inherently. So it is your job to both be valuable, but more importantly, communicate that value to your audience, right? So many of us sit on the value that we hold for the world because we think, oh, people are going to know. People, if I build it, they will come. Ain't nobody fucking coming. Okay. You got to tell them where the fuck the field is that you just built and why it's a good field to go to, right? Like that is where marketing, copywriting, SEO, like that's where that shit is supposed to be focused, right? It's supposed to be scammy and clickbaiting shit. It's supposed to be like, look, here's why this piece of content I made is highly valuable for you specifically. Right. I remember when I first, started, my company and shit, I was like, I have to have a physical, mailing address so that people can send me fan mail because it's clearly going to be so helpful. And like all these people are just, oh, which size box should I get? Probably going to be sending me packages. Motherfucker, I haven't gotten a single goddamn piece of fan mail. And it was delusional to think I would. Right. It was.
And to wait like, on that,
Yeah. And to be like, oh, this, 3x3 box is like, this much, but then like the 12x12, like that's a couple hundred more, but that'll fit all the packages. Like
it's easy to laugh at it, but we all do it. And every business owner I've ever talked to tells me some dumb shit like that, where I'm just like, no, dude.
Yeah. But the thing is, man, is like consistency is the key, right? And my biggest obstacle, the thing that I've been most focused on is how do I communicate the value that I am trying to create, right? Because obviously if I get somebody in, one-on-one coaching, I know for a fact I can help them, like period. Cause I am damn good at what I do because I've spent over 15 years fucking with it, right? You spend 10 to 15 years doing anything, you'll be pretty good. But the issue is when I'm writing an article, who am I writing it to and how does it help them? Okay, now I've created this really awesome article. How do I get it in front of people so that it can benefit them? Otherwise, you're just burying diamonds, right? Like it's awesome, super pretty, super cool, very valuable. But if nobody sees it, it doesn't fucking matter. And I think especially like, with a lot of professionals, such as, mental health professionals, are like, oh, I have all this knowledge. And it's like, yeah, but you're sitting on it.
Yeah.
Like, right. Well, but liability, like that's the thing, man. Like a lot of psychologists are hyper paranoid about liability. Like, oh, well, this isn't therapy advice, or opinions are my own. Like, look, man, just put in your fucking terms and service and call it a fucking day.
Yeah.
Like, hashtag not legal advice, but just move the fuck on, man.
Yeah. It feels, I think it probably feels good to have that, like, to have some kind of discretionary, to make those discretionary claims probably feels good. It's like some kind of ego stroke, in a subconscious way. Just like, hey, everything I say is really important.
Yeah, but also not professional advice. Please don't take it and fuck up your life and then sue me, right? Like, that's always like the caveat.
They're like handcuffs, basically,
Yeah. And we do have a pretty strict ethics code, and that's part of it. But
but at a certain point, I would hope that like everyone, the investment, the bigger the investment that you make, the more it can become a shackle, in anything. And so it's important to like to take audit, of that for everyone who's doing anything, if whatever you do for a living, or like, it's not more important than who you really are. If it's false, if it's false in any way, then it's not more valuable than the truth, And so I kind of walked away from helping or trying to consult therapists, because there's like, man, there's so much. It's almost ironic that there was just so much like cognitive bias holding them back from success. It's like, you guys are the psychologists, I'm just a marketing guy, I'm out of here.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like therapy is incredibly valuable, right? But you're right, the paradigm around the business of therapy is super fucked.
Yeah. And that's the thing, the whole reason I wanted to try to consult therapists, which was like a short time in my life, like 18 months or so. It was like a pet project, was because they helped me so much. They helped me become a different person, and so I thought, let's get this in front of more people. And that's why I do the podcast. That's why I have psychologists on the podcast, because it helped me. And I was so ignorant. I had no idea what therapy was. And I know that there's just the everyday man like me who could have their life changed and then become a world changer themselves, if they just like were opened up to the idea that, hey, it's cool. Like, there's tons of cool people who have therapists, who, lots of therapists are really cool people. So that's why it's just awareness. At least that's the least I could do.
Well, and man, that's another reason why, I originally started writing online is, if you're trying to find information on like, personal development or just psychology in general, there aren't very many places for you to go. Like Very Well Mind, like Very Well, like they're a really good company. There are a couple others that put out legitimate content, but beyond those, you have two options, right? You can go to an expert, and most of them are locked away in the ivory towers of academia or, private practice, or you go to like the bullshit, like snake oil gurus, right? Like, because the gurus are really good at talking and selling, but what they're selling is bullshit. The experts know what they're talking about, but don't know how to convey their knowledge in like non-jargony ways. So that was my thing. Was like, oh, I want to be the bridge, right? Like, I have all this expertise, but I talk like a normal motherfucker.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're right. Like, so many people could benefit from things like this podcast, like, a lot of, thankfully, more content coming out in this space that's real. But if people like you don't put it out there, people can't benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sucks that the system is broken. And then it gives us our purpose, to try to just like spread awareness, right? The things that we find are the truth. We're aiming for the truth, and just like helping clarify like what we're all doing here. I think like we all like it's like we're living our parents' lives, like the people, our parents and the communities that were running things when we were kids had things running a certain way. And, obviously the world is a complex, multi-layered thing, but in essence, the previous generations have built this this environment for us, and we're trying to clarify the mess of the evolutionary process along the way, because we know that it's only going to become more and more complex. So like people say that like, man, now might not be the the dawning of the internet, podcasts, blogging, but it's still important that we do this because we're the ones that are here right now living the life, and the next generation is going to need to know how to navigate,
That and trust, right? Like more and more people are losing trust in larger organizations, and they're putting more of that trust into smaller creators that they feel a connection with, right? That's the reason why like all these big companies are trying to focus on like creating a brand narrative to like try to build back that trust and this connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
But people like you, there's a face to you. There's not a face to a major, like most major companies. There's people fucking love Elon Musk and Tesla and SpaceX because of him, because they could put a face to the company.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the thing, man, is I don't buy into podcasts are dead, YouTube is dead, also the shit, because where do we go for entertainment or education? Dude, even my fucking doctorate was most like 75+% thanks to YouTube, Wikipedia, and Google.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And even like Ali Abdaal, he's a big YouTuber. He talked about it. Like he went to Cambridge Medical School. He was like, look, though, most of the shit that we did was self-taught. Like we also learned a lot from the internet, more so than like our actual classes. So like, yeah, like, these are big names, Ivy League, equivalent names, but the education, the quality of the education isn't that different, because so much of the responsibility is on you as the individual to teach yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I know about things like Very Well Mind. It's like, I was like, fuck, what is this Dr. Singer two-factor theory, model of, whatever. Let me Google it. And then their, article came up. I'm like, oh, this is super fucking good information. Like, I'm going to remember this.
Yeah. And someone's life purpose was like, I'm going to codify this shit and I'm going to call it Very Well Mind. And that's what they do,
Yeah.
That's insane. And like, man, and knowledge is knowledge, dude. I'm realizing that as well. I mean, there's like there was two 16-year-old kids in the rite of passage class, and I was reading their essays and I had no idea. Like I would not have known that they were 16 by reading their essays. And if I found their blog, I would have read it just like anybody else's blog. One of them was about childhood education. She's still in high school, and you couldn't tell it was a high schooler writing it. My girlfriend, she's trying to be she's studying to be a kindergarten teacher right now. She was like really interested in the whole writing thing. Like, I wonder if I could write. I'm not credentialed. I'm not even credentialed yet, So there's a 16-year-old girl writing about childhood education in rite of passage right now. And if you read it, you wouldn't think that it wasn't a credentialed teacher, So it's like the cream rises to the top on the internet, and no matter who you are, like the only identity that's holding you back from being successful on the internet is the one that you're creating in your own mind. Like the person who you are right now, I guarantee there's someone who's worse off doing something amazing on the internet right now,
Yeah. Another thing that Ali Abdaal has talked about is, I can't remember if we talked about it in Rite of Passage, but being a guide instead of a guru, right? Which again, to me, the term guru makes me gag because people misuse it. But Ali's whole thing is, don't wait until you're the expert, or don't wait until you feel like an expert. You can be a couple steps ahead of somebody and teach them what you've learned so far. So not saying this is the end all be all so much as here's what I've learned along the way. And that approach, I think, is so much more approachable to help people get over this, imposter syndrome bullshit that stops so many people from putting out the value they have to give to the world. They're like, oh, well, but somebody else is going to say it better than me, or I'm not far enough along. Look, you're never going to fucking feel like you are ready, right? Like I remember when I was in grad school, we did this homeless outreach event. So, psychology, med school, pharmacy school, a bunch of other, departments. We got together like the back of the church parking lot in December. so cold as fuck. And we did this outreach event for people experiencing homelessness. So like they could come get clothes, food, get a medical checkup, get, prescriptions if they needed it, whatever. And I'm like, what in the fuck am I supposed to do? Like these motherfuckers don't need deep breathing fucking techniques. Like they're literally like they're fighting for their fucking lives, living out
Yeah.
on the street in midwinter. I don't have a goddamn thing to help these people with. Like y'all's shit is too real for me to be helpful.
Yeah.
I'm used to like helping people like I said, like do deep breathing for like mild panic attacks or some shit. And I walked up to two of my supervisors who between the two of them had like 50 years of therapy experience. I was like, hey, when is this feeling like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing go away? And they looked at me, they're like, we'll let you know. Meaning even they, experts at the top of their field, felt fucking lost.
Yeah.
So from that moment on, I quit having imposter syndrome because I was like, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. And that's okay. So even though I don't know what the fuck I'm doing right now in therapy, in coaching, in this article, in this fucking video, whatever, I'll figure it out.
Yep. Yep. Exactly, dude. And that's something that I've learned from competing in jiu-jitsu a lot. I was always on stage. When I was little, I played the piano. When I was 4 years old, I started doing piano recitals. Then I was in bands, rock bands, 15, 16, 17, all the way up to 23 on stage every weekend. But I still get this like performance anxiety, right? It's like stage fright. And I think that's just the feeling of confronting fear of any kind. It's like, you're never going to be ready. It's like you said, there's a story I have when I was a kid, very, very little, on the high diving board of the high school pool in the summertime. I'd never been on the high dive before. And the lifeguard was coming up to get me down because I didn't want to jump. And I realized at that moment that like the embarrassment would be too great, like to go down with the lifeguard. Everyone, the pool was packed with the town's kids. I jumped anyway. Pencil jumped as she was coming to grab me. And I always refer to that story as like the feeling of confronting your fear, like literally being pushed off a diving board. That feeling of like, oh fuck, I don't want this moment to happen. But it's like those are the moments that we avoid that keep us from having the life that we want. From the saying, the thing you want is on the other side of the thing that you fear. Mm-hmm. Doing this podcast this morning, like I hadn't done a podcast in a few months, so it was like, oh man, is it going to go well? What is it? It's just talking. You and I have talked on Zoom several times in the last month, but there's still a little anxiety because it's the moment before the unknown. And jiu-jitsu taught me that a lot, man. Competing, it was like I'd never done anything on stage before like that was similar, because it's just anytime you put yourself in a new environment, that challenge is going to feel like, life or death. And overcoming that feeling through competing over and over again has been for sure one of the most transformative like things that I've ever done. I just competed last month it was like a cage match for an amateur MMA fight. And that was the first time that I actually felt like I knew I was going to feel afraid, like in the shoot, but I was so conditioned to that feeling that I didn't let it ever become fear. I just kept it like as excited energy all the way into the cage. And that was the first time that I realized like, holy fuck, I've actually conditioned myself enough to this feeling that I know how to talk myself through each step. Now I know when I'm in the shoot, I'm like 5 minutes from now or 10 minutes from now, I'm going to be back here and it's going to be over no matter what. And having these little dialogues with yourself, training yourself to have these dialogues in the worst moments. It's like, that's a conditioning that you can only get from actually confronting fear, like head on.
Yeah. That, and just understanding like, this is your body preparing itself to perform, right? Now, for some people that is debilitating, right? Like they get paralyzed from this preparation, and other people really thrive on it, right? Dude, like you said, like even this podcast, right? Like I said, I taught for years. I love talking. I love just, I just love talking. I peed like 3 times before this fucking podcast. And this is a casual conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But my body's like, hey, we got shit that's getting ready to happen. Like, we got to prepare. Right. That's normal. It's like, that's the issue. People get fucked up. They're like, I shouldn't feel this way. You fucking should. That is your issue. The issue isn't how you feel. The issue is your labeling of that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're saying this feeling is bad. The feeling isn't bad. The feeling is a fucking feeling, period. How you label, like you said, your internal, monologue with it, that is what dictates whether you become paralyzed from it or can use it as fuel to perform better, period. Because, man, as soon as this podcast started, I didn't have to pee anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking go time. I have crossed that threshold. There's no more preparing, right? Like, my body kicks out like, oh, we don't have to prepare anymore because it started, right? So learning to lean into that instead of trying to avoid this, what you've labeled as a negative sensation, it isn't bad. It is your body preparing to do something. And that is perfectly normal.
Yeah. And there's something about living a life where you lean into that feeling frequently that it gives you some kind of like peace that, about your path. Like, when you live a life where you continuously lean into the things that you're afraid of and do those things, 6 months go by, a year goes by, and you're actually proud of who you've become because you haven't been cowering from your fear subconsciously the whole time, If it wasn't for that, I never would have started jujitsu.
Anytime I start to question myself and I just need just a little bit of a nudge, I always go back to Theodore Roosevelt's the Men of the Arena speech. Never fails to kick my ass in gear. So if your listeners aren't familiar with that, I would definitely look it up. It's a super good, fairly short speech that basically, just says, it isn't the critic who counts. Like, it isn't the person who can point their finger and be an armchair quarterback and tell you what you should or shouldn't have done. It's the person who is in the arena. It's the person who puts themselves out there or their work out there, to succeed, to fail, to face criticism, whatever. That's the person who fucking matters, right? The person who's willing to face that fear, to embrace uncertainty. Those are the people who actually matter. And the only people who have a chance to make something of themselves or to make the world a better place. Critics don't make the world better at fucking all. Anybody can sit there and talk shit about somebody, right? You and me watching, if we watch UFC, right? There's always that motherfucker with a KFC bucket who's like, oh, stand him up, ref. Like, I wouldn't work on me. Motherfucker, have you been in the cage ever? Have you ever been on the mats? No, then shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
There's always that person. So, but those aren't the people you listen to, because if you wouldn't want to be more like that person, why would you listen to any opinion they have about how you should live your life?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Like, we all have that the inner critic. It's like a panel of judges. Like, I, whenever I'm pushing myself through something like this, like, should I compete or getting ready to compete, I think of there's a handful of figures in my life who I think of. I think of my parents. I think of a couple of childhood friends, maybe a previous girlfriend, all what they might say if I lose, right? And those are the people who I have to contend with in my subconscious before I can say, okay, I'll do it. And so the voices of those critics, none of those critics on my panel are actually experts. It's not Gordon Ryan on the panel, John Danaher or Joe Rogan. None of the people I actually admire are in my inner judge panel. It's just people from my childhood who may have criticized me for doing something similar that I have to make sure that I can contend with if I fail,
Nipsey Hussle had this really good quote that went something along the lines of, you'll never be criticized by somebody doing more than you. You'll only be criticized by people doing less than you. Right. And that's my thing, man. So you're talking about, training and Danaher and all those other people. So I train at Chewy's gym, right? Like Derby City MMA, the Jiu-Jitsu YouTube channel, whatever. Chewy competes. Chewy rolls with everybody. Chewy's a legit black belt. I can't remember if he's been training 16 years or longer, or has been a black belt that long, but he's fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you would think if you go and compete and then make a stupid mistake or don't win or something, he would be very critical. He's fucking not. He is the most supportive, empowering person I've seen on the mats, because he's doing more than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows how hard it is to compete, to put yourself out there. And I've watched people who had a dog shit performance, because I don't compete anymore. I've watched people who just look fucking awful, right? But one, they still put themselves out there. And two, when I hear Chewy talk to him about it, he doesn't say like, hey, you look like dog shit out there, right? He was like, hey, we have a couple things to work on, but you did well because
Mm-hmm.
you put yourself out there, right? And so I really take that model of his behavior as an example of like, look, anybody who's worth their salt isn't going to talk shit to you and tear you down. They may offer very specific, constructive feedback, but they're not going to tell you not to pursue something. They're not going to tell you you're going to fail, because people who have succeeded don't focus on failure like that. They don't
Mm-hmm.
assume you're going to fuck up and shit, because they've seen that it's possible to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. And they've failed so many times that it doesn't hurt as bad as it hurts the person who just fails once a month, once a year, twice a year,
Because the key is to keep going. And that's what successful people, in my experience, focus on, is like, okay, you fucked up, get back up. Because if you just keep getting back up, eventually something will happen, right? Again, jujitsu, Chris Howder, one of his, he's like an OG guy. He was like, with jujitsu, like, how do you get better? And he was like, look, it's not about who's good. It's about who's left, right? Like, you even think like me and you, right? Like, we're both purple belts. I've been training about 8 years. The number of people I've seen come through a gym, I can't count, right? Because so many of them will come in, train for a little bit, and quit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And they say, black belt is just a white belt who didn't give up, like all that cliche type shit, but it's fucking true. If you just keep going, no matter how many times you fail or tap out or lose or whatever, eventually you make enough progress to cross a threshold into success.
Yeah, man, it must be really infectious being around that gym, and there must be a higher standard of excellence in that gym. And one thing I've noticed in my journey is like the black belts that are like, because anyone can be a black belt. You spend 10 years in jiu-jitsu, 12 years in jiu-jitsu, you can be a black belt. But the black belts who are also excellent people, and those are the black belts who have that magnetic attraction to, and they have a ton of students, because people don't just want to be as good as them at jiu-jitsu. They want to be like them as a guy or as a person, and I can imagine that jiu-jitsu gym has that culture of excellence because of how Chewy is on YouTube, and how he does compete and put himself out there. He seems like he's also a good guy to be around. Sometimes you don't always get that from a YouTube perspective, but he definitely seems like a genuine dude.
Yeah. So that was my concern. Like, before we moved here and I started training, I was like, man, like, he's super cool online, but like, what if he's a douche in real life? Chewy is the same motherfucker, man. Like, the same person you see on, on video, he is that same guy. Like, he doesn't put it on for the camera. Like, he just turns the camera on. He's the same motherfucker. It's awesome.
That's super cool, dude. Yeah. That's one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu is like you get to learn from black belts who are outstanding in jiu-jitsu, but also in life. It breeds good people. And the 10-year journey to black belt is it's like an alchemy phase where you can become a better person in a lot of different categories of your life based on the virtues that you gain from jiu-jitsu. I've noticed that, like, not to say white belts are worse people than black belts, but like, it's a vehicle for anyone to get better, in life. I've definitely improved as a person. I've become refined, like a sculpture. I've become more defined from jiu-jitsu,
Mm-hmm. And from like a mental health perspective, I've trained with people who were severely claustrophobic. So you get them in mount and they just freak out, right? Because they can't move. But they stuck with it. And over, a couple months, they weren't claustrophobic anymore. They weren't tapping just to a position, right?
Yeah.
That could take you again, I'm not trying to talk shit about therapy, right? But that something like that can take you way longer to achieve in that specific thing in therapy, purely because of the nature of therapy, right? Therapy isn't immersive. Like occasionally there are some types of therapy where like you're doing shit like in vivo, like in session with claustrophobia and things. But honestly, man, most people aren't willing to deal with the liability of it. So they don't. So it's all like imaginary. In jiu-jitsu, like it's straight up like a motherfucker is on you.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu is as soon as you tap, we reset. That builds trust. That builds this sense of self-efficacy in you. Like, oh, I can control the situation. And that translates to so many other areas in life. Right. I've also seen a couple of stories about like VAs, like for veterans, offering jiu-jitsu classes through the VA to help veterans with PTSD and shit.
Yeah.
Right. And because, there's a lot of hypervigilance, there's a lot of, anxiety and things like that. And jiu-jitsu for a lot of people is a very good outlet. And in the true definition, it's therapeutic. Right. So yes, you build camaraderie, you build skills that help your self-esteem. You learn how to, do diaphragmatic breathing, deep breathing to control, your heart rate and shit. But there are so many other mental health benefits that, again, it isn't just physical. It isn't just that you can choke a motherfucker out in a couple seconds, or you can do this, or you can, handle your own. There's so many mental benefits that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
So like as a psychologist, I'm a huge proponent of people, if you are physically capable, of at least trying out jiu-jitsu, if for nothing else, your mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're a uniquely positioned to describe jiu-jitsu, the benefits, like in a in a unique way. Like that's exactly, I think, the perspective that people need to hear. That's like all my advocacy for jiu-jitsu is because I came to jiu-jitsu as a depressed, alone 26-year-old dude, and now my entire life has changed. And I don't know that I wouldn't have killed myself if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu, And so, a lot of what I do is just like a non-professional advocacy of the things that have changed my mind, my mental paradigm, my spirit, my identity, my existential identity, and my physical health, because I've also been in car accidents, and without jiu-jitsu, I don't know that my spine would move, from the back, that halfway down. I don't know if my body would be the same without jiu-jitsu. So this thing, like, I call it like a simulator, it's a life simulator. Like you said, you get stuck under mount, you can learn to deal with your anxiety. I've had the mount smothering anxiety, like, oh, I want to tap. And every single time I'm like, if I don't tap to this, that means I will never have to tap to mount, And so it's always a challenge that you can use to reshape your paradigm, in every way, even being merciful when you're dominating somebody.
That and the conversations you have on the mat after class are some of the deepest you'll have in your life. Like if you go to a good gym, like, and you just hang out and you're kind of a gym rat, and you just, after everybody's done, exhausted, everybody's, fucking sweat puddles everywhere. If you just hang out, like there's no bullshit at that point, because people are too tired to keep up a facade. Like that is when you have real conversations with real people. I love it.
Yeah. People from all walks of life. I think the biggest obstacle is people think that you have to be in a certain physical condition to get started. And that's just not true. You can be anybody. There's 12-year-old kids in the gym. There's 60, 70-year-old people in the gym.
Yeah. And the other great thing with that too is, you'll have, because we all have a story, but like when I started, I went against this like 16-year-old kid and I had 100 pounds on him easy. I was like, okay, I understand jiu-jitsu is about leverage, also bullshit, but like, surely to God, I can just hold this motherfucker down. Like, gravity is on my side. That motherfucker tapped me out so many times in a 5-minute round, I lost count.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, and even now, right? Like, the mats don't care how educated you are or what your net worth is, or if you're a felon. Like, none of that matters, right? Like, I on a regular basis train with people who make fucking bank, who are in recovery from heroin, who, are super, important, or this or that, or fucking nobody when it comes to like the social ladder. Right. And we all have an equal chance of fucking each other up based purely on how much we train and how well we train. It's such a good equalizer.
Yeah. It's amazing, dude. It really is amazing. I couldn't have put it better myself. Like, it's such a amazing experience because it's literally the people from all across your tribe, wherever you live. It's a perfect cross section of the entire society, and you get to just fucking wrestle them down. It's amazing.
And it's like, it's a good way to bypass all of the like anxiety of like, oh, but they're more important than me. Fuck them, they're still a person. But it's also, even like, me and you, like, we connect, like, oh, dude, you do jiu-jitsu? Fuck yeah. Right. Like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Fuck yeah. Right. Like, it's just like instantly you have a connection, and it doesn't matter if you agree on nothing else, politically, religiously, philosophically, it doesn't matter, because you have that connection, and that is enough of a connection to bridge virtually any gap.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing too. Like, one thing I didn't realize when I was a white belt was how many significant friendships I would make through jiu-jitsu with people who had no other relation to me. And 5 years later, looking back, the most significant people in my life, if I post something on Facebook or Instagram or something happens, the people who care the most are the people I met through jiu-jitsu. They're the people from old gyms. They're the happiest for me because there was just such a unique, genuine bond,
And like, anytime you travel, you have instant access to either places to train or people, if you want to like crash on the couch or something. Like, I've heard people traveling all over the country and just crashing on couches purely from just like teammates, or like, hey guys, I'm going to be in Chicago next month. Where should I train? And then they get a bunch of recommendations, and people are like, hey man, I'll show you around. It's insane. You don't get that with any other sport that I've seen. Maybe wrestling. I don't know much about wrestling, but like, you don't get that with football or basketball. Like, you can't just go train with like some superstar in any other sport. Like, when I went to New York City, we just took like a mini trip. I went to Marcelo Garcia's gym and got to hang out with the fucking GOAT.
It's insane.
Like, that's insane. I just like, hey, Marcelo. He's like, oh, hey, like, fucking insane. You don't get that with any other sport.
Any day. Yeah. It'd be like LeBron James having an open basketball gym.
Yeah. And be like, hey man, next time you're in, we'll play horse.
Yeah. Any day of the week, just show up. Like, it's impossible. Yeah. Like, last night I watched Gordon Ryan's exhibition match, who's number one. And he said, yeah, we're training down in Austin. Just come by. And he said the name of the gym. And I thought, he just said that on Flow Grappling, and he meant it. He wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it. Anyone can show up tomorrow and train with John and Gordon. Yep. And for whatever the mat fee is, doesn't matter. It's insane. I really appreciate this, dude. The one thing we'll have to talk about the next time is just more about like your process. I'd love to learn more about like, how you actually help orient someone, what the actual exercises are. I know you'd have to give away a lot more, and we'll have to come back together in the future and talk more about this, because it's just like so many things we could talk about still. We could just keep going on and on.
Yeah, no, man, I'm down. Just hit me up. I'm down to come back on. This is super fun.
Everybody, please read Corey's blog. Every essay is very intentional and valuable. He's put a lot of effort into giving free value. He's also got a newsletter with several editions you can go and check out, and follow him on Twitter. He's an active user on Twitter. So If you have any questions for him, you want to learn more about him, those are the three best places. He's Corey Wilks PsyD on Twitter and CoreyWilksPsyD.com. Anything else? Any last minute? If you have one thing that you could say to the listeners, Corey, about how they can make the most out of life, what would it be?
Get hyper clear on what your core value is, right? Is it freedom? Is it authenticity? Is it service to others? Something. And once you have clarity on your core value, design everything else in your life and business around that core value. You can't not achieve fulfillment at that point.
Amen. Amen, brother. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Corey Wilks.
Thanks, everybody.
What if when you woke up this morning, you realized your entire past life had been just one dream?
You're one node in a network of 7.5 billion nodes. That network is interwoven with countless other networks on
You
Earth.
can say some words, and it can cause heaven or hell on earth.
To find others like we and help them become the heroes of their own lives.
Join us. Together we will find more power.
Join us. Join us. We are GodXP.
We are GodXP. Level up your spirit.
Together we will find more power.